She only meant to save his life with one terrified whisper. She never expected the most feared man in the city to decide she was the only person he'd ever listen to again. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. The chandeliers above the ballroom glowed with warm gold, their light reflecting off crystal glasses and diamonds worth more than Amira's yearly salary. The charity gala was a world she only ever entered in a black apron, balancing silver trays and trying not to slip on polished marble. She'd been running on adrenaline for hours, smiling politely at people who didn't notice her, dodging impatient hands, listening to conversations about mansions and yachts, while she tried to remember if rent was due this week or next. But beneath the glamour was a tension she couldn't name, a hum in the air that felt like a storm gathering behind velvet curtains. Amira paused at the edge of the ballroom, adjusting the tray of champagne flutes in her hands. She scanned the crowd out of habit, one of the first skills she'd learned in a room full of powerful, unpredictable people. That's when she saw him. A man in a tailored black suit standing near the center of the room like he belonged there more than the chandelier above him. He didn't smile, didn't mingle, didn't pretend to enjoy the music or the speeches. He simply stood there, watching the room like he owned every heartbeat in it. Amira didn't know his name, but there was something about him, an aura that pulled her attention like gravity. A man like that didn't need a spotlight. He was a spotlight. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, quiet power carved into every line of his posture. She forced herself to look away. It didn't matter who he was. This wasn't her world. She moved again, weaving between tables, when something flickered in the corner of her vision. A shadow. A shape where none should be. Behind a marble pillar, half hidden by draped ivy and gold ribbon, a man stood with his back pressed to the column. His hand was low, concealed by the tablecloth draped nearby. Too concealed. Amira slowed, her breath hitched. Between the gap of the curtain and the pillar, she saw it. A gun. Black metal. Raised. Aimed. Her tray wobbled, a flute tipped. She barely caught it. "No," she breathed. Her eyes snapped to the target. The man in the black suit. The one who looked too calm for this room. The one who felt like a storm disguised as a person. He had no idea. Time fractured. The tray in her hands blurred. The music faded. Every thought in her mind dissolved into a single, instinctive command. Move. Before she even made the decision, her feet were already crossing the ballroom floor. Her pulse thundered. Her throat tightened. She didn't think of consequences. Didn't think of safety. Didn't think at all. Her body simply acted. She reached him as the gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. The man turned slightly, as if sensing her approach, his eyes flicking toward her. Sharp, dark, narrowing with curiosity. She didn't stop moving. Holding the tray like a shield despite her shaking hands, she leaned in, close enough to smell clean cologne and something darker beneath it. Her lips brushed the air beside his ear. "Don't turn around," she whispered, barely breathing the words. "Someone's behind you." For a split second, he didn't react. Then everything changed. His spine straightened. His hand rose subtly. His eyes sharpened like glass under flame. He heard her. He believed her. Without looking back, he shifted his weight a hair to the right, and the gun went off. A muffled thud echoed from behind the pillar, the bullet burying itself in the ornate molding where his head had been a second earlier. Amira froze. The tray slipped from her hands, champagne flutes shattering around her feet like falling stars. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Screams followed. People ducked, chaos erupting around them. But the man she warned didn't move away. He moved toward her. In one fluid, terrifyingly precise motion, he grabbed her by the waist, pulling her behind him as he twisted, eyes locked on the direction of the shooter. His body shielded hers completely, his stance steady, lethal. "Stay behind me," he murmured, voice low and controlled, as if calming her, not himself. Amira could barely breathe. She had just saved a stranger's life with a whisper. And now in the middle of a room full of panic and danger. He acted like she was the only person that mattered. The world didn't slow. It snapped. The instant Amira's whisper brushed the stranger's ear, something in him shifted. His posture, once relaxed and disinterested, tightened with coiled precision. His eyes, dark, unreadable, sharpened into something feral, something focused, like he'd been waiting his whole life for a warning exactly like hers. He didn't turn, he didn't speak, he didn't doubt her. He simply moved. A subtle tilt of his head, a half step to the side, a shift in his spine so slight it looked accidental. The bullet cut through the space where his skull had been a second earlier and buried itself in the marble column behind him with a sickening crack. Gasps rippled through the ballroom as the first scream broke the music like glass. Amira's tray crashed to the floor, champagne exploded upward in sparkling arcs. Flutes skittered across marble, but the man never flinched. He spun with a speed that didn't belong to someone in a tailored suit. His hand shot forward, grabbing the nearest tablecloth and ripping it from the table with a force that made silverware scatter. He used it to shroud the nearest guests, pushing them down, out of the line of fire. By the time the gunman realized he'd missed, the stranger was already moving. The ballroom erupted, chairs overturned, heels scraped against marble, security shouted uselessly. But the man Amira had warned didn't hesitate. He closed the distance between them and the shooter with terrifying purpose, slipping through chaos like smoke. The gunman's eyes widened. Too slow. The stranger slammed into him, one hand twisting the shooter's wrist until the gun clattered to the floor. With his other hand, he drove the man back into the pillar with enough force to knock the breath from his lungs. A grunt, a struggle. 2 muffled blows that sounded final. Amira couldn't see exactly what happened, but she knew. The gunman wouldn't try again. Before she could register anything else, a firm hand closed around her wrist. Not bruising, not panicked, but controlled. She stumbled as he pulled her toward him. Wait, no. Just one word, quiet. Absolute. He dragged her behind him, placing his body squarely between her and the rest of the room as chaos spiraled outward. His arm swept back, catching her waist, anchoring her so tightly against him, she could feel the steady, unshakable rhythm of his breathing. People crashed past them, running, crying, shouting. But he absorbed every shove, every jolt, never letting her stumble. Amira pressed a hand to his back without thinking, fingers meeting warm fabric stretched over unyielding muscle. She felt the tension thrumming in him. Not fear, but calculation. Readiness. Are you hurt? He asked, voice dark, steady, too calm for the violence that had just happened. Amira shook her head, breath trembling. No, Good. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. His attention was on the room, reading threats, mapping exits, anticipating movement like he'd been born for moments exactly like this. Security finally pushed toward them, shouting questions, trying to regain control. The stranger lifted one hand palm up, an order. Not loud, not aggressive, but they froze. They actually froze. Amira's eyes widened as the head of security, a man who regularly escorted senators and CEOs, bowed his head slightly, like he was receiving instruction. Who was he? Are there more? One guard stammered. The stranger's jaw tensed. Not anymore. There was something chilling in the certainty of those words. His grip on Amira's waist tightened when a fleeing guest bumped into her shoulder. She winced, and the stranger moved instantly, angling her closer, his chest brushing her back, arm tightening around her as if shielding her was instinct, not choice. The noise around them felt distant, muffled, like they were in a world separate from the panic surrounding them. Only him. Only his heartbeat. Only the warmth of his hand at her waist. Stay with me, he murmured. Not please. Not if you want to. Not are you okay. Stay with me. Amira swallowed hard. I am. He finally looked down at her then, his gaze sweeping over her face as if checking for wounds the way a doctor might check for bleeding. But there was something deeper in his stare. A recognition. A decision forming behind his eyes. She had saved him, and he wasn't used to being saved. His hand didn't leave her waist. Not even when security tried again to insert themselves. Not even when the gala organizers shouted questions. Not even when people began pointing, whispering, staring. Everyone in the ballroom looked at him with fear. He looked only at her. And in that suspended moment, while the world reeled around them, Amira realized something terrifyingly simple. She had just become the most important person in the room to the most dangerous man in it. The ballroom had finally calmed, at least as much as a room full of shaken elites could calm after witnessing a shooting, but Amira felt anything but steady. She stood beneath one of the crystal chandeliers, wrapped in the stranger's jacket, surrounded by trembling guests and frantic murmurs. But he wasn't trembling. He wasn't murmuring. He wasn't even pretending to check if he was okay. He was staring at her, unmoving, unblinking, undivided. Dark eyes fixed on her as though she were the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. The only thing worth worrying about. The man who had just dodged a bullet like it was nothing, seemed more shaken by her whisper than by the attack itself. A security commander approached cautiously, nodding his head with deference that looked shockingly out of place. "Mr. Moretti, the police are on their way." Amira's heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Moretti?" She turned toward the man she'd warned, confused, but froze when she saw the others bow their heads slightly as they approached him. Not respectfully, not politely, fearfully. Her stomach dropped. Raphael Moretti. That name she knew. Everyone knew. In the news online, whispered behind closed doors. The city's most untouchable, most ruthless, most respected criminal power. A walking ghost story, a shadow draped in Armanian blood. She had warned him. He didn't look at the security commander. Didn't acknowledge the officials circling like anxious moths. His full attention was still locked onto Amira, as if he couldn't hear anything but her breathing. When she stepped back, overwhelmed, he tilted his head like she'd done something unexpectedly fascinating. Not wrong, not insulting, just curious. "Raphael," one of the security men murmured, "we need to evacuate you." "No." Raphael didn't raise his voice, didn't even blink. Not yet. But the refusal hit like a gunshot. The man who'd spoken nodded immediately, stepping back without protest. They were afraid to push him, afraid to upset him, afraid to question him. Amira's pulse hammered in her ears. "You're Raphael Moretti," she whispered. He didn't smile. Not exactly, but something in his expression shifted, a shadowed amusement mixed with something sharper. A predator noticing its prey isn't running. "Does that frighten you?" he asked softly. She swallowed hard. "Should it?" His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with a seriousness that felt too heavy, too intimate. "For most people," he said, "yes." But his gaze dropped, drifting slowly over her face as though memorizing it. Not in a crude way, not like a man undressing a woman with his eyes. He looked at her like she was a code he'd been handed without warning, one he fully intended to decipher. "You're not most people, though," he added, voice low. Amira's throat tightened. "You don't know me." He stepped slightly closer, just enough to make the air around him feel warmer, heavier. "You whispered a warning into the ear of a man you didn't recognize. You risked your life for a stranger." His eyes flicked down to her trembling hands. "You think I haven't been watching you since?" She stiffened. "Since when?" "Since the second I realized your voice was the reason I'm standing here alive." There it was again, that unwavering focus, the intensity that made everyone else back away but pulled her in. She shouldn't have stepped closer. She shouldn't have looked up at him. She definitely shouldn't have let the question slip out. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Raphael's breathing changed, barely noticeable, but enough. "Because," he said quietly, "in a room full of enemies, men who owe me favors, men who fear me, men who would kill for me, you're the only person who didn't want anything from me." He reached out, not touching her, but lifting a hand near her face, as if testing whether she'd flinch. She didn't. He noticed. "And that," he murmured, "is something I don't let out of my sight." Her pulse thundered against her ribs. People around them kept their distance, watching Raphael out of the corners of their eyes, terrified to approach him. But the danger radiating from him wasn't aimed outward. It was focused entirely, intensely, on her. Amira had saved the most feared man in the city with a whisper, and as he examined her with that dark, consuming stare, she realized something even more dangerous. He wasn't afraid of anything, except letting her walk away. The valet brought Raphael's car around, a sleek black machine that looked like it could outrun bullets, and Amira realized something unsettling. Everyone was waiting for him to leave. No one breathed until he moved. No one blinked until he gave them permission. Yet Raphael remained exactly where he was, standing beside her like the two of them were alone in the chaos, instead of surrounded by 100 shaken guests. His jacket was still around her shoulders, warm from his body heat, heavy with a scent she couldn't define. Dark cedar, smoke, something expensive and dangerous. "Come," he said quietly, guiding her toward the car with a hand hovering near her lower back. Not touching, but close enough, she felt the warmth of him through the thin fabric of her dress. "Wait, where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Home," he replied. Her steps faltered. "Your home?" That earned the faintest twitch of amusement in his lips. "Not tonight." He opened the passenger door with a gentleness that felt out of place for a man who'd taken down a gunman 5 minutes earlier. "I'm driving you to your home." "Raphael, I don't... Amira." He said her name like it was something precious he'd been waiting to unwrap. "You just witnessed a hit. And not just any hit. A message intended for me. Whoever sent that man will want to know who whispered in my ear." Her stomach dropped. "You're safer with me." She looked up at him then. Really looked. The sharp lines of his face, the cold calculation in his eyes, the tension in his jaw that hadn't softened since the shooting. And beneath all of that, something strange. Concern. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Get in the car." Something about the way he said it, quiet, steady, unshakable, made her obey before she could think. Inside, the leather seat hugged her like a second skin. Raphael slipped behind the wheel with predatory grace, shutting out the world the moment the door clicked. The silence that settled between them wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the seconds before lightning strikes. He drove smoothly, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift, but she noticed how tense his fingers were, how frequently his eyes flicked to the mirror. He wasn't looking for traffic. He was looking for threats. She swallowed. "Are you always this protective of strangers?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced sideways, his eyes catching the passing streetlights, making them flare gold. "You're not a stranger." "That's debatable," she whispered. "Is it?" He leaned back, voice low enough to vibrate through the car. "You leaned in. You whispered in my ear. You stood so close your heartbeat touched me before your words did." Her breath caught. "I could feel your fear," he continued softly. "But you still warned me. Do you know how rare that is?" She looked down at her hands. "I just reacted. I didn't think." "I know. That's what makes it real." The car slowed as they reached a red light, glowing blood red across his expression. He turned toward her fully now, one arm resting casually on the wheel, his body angled in her direction like she was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. "You saved my life," his tone deepened. "That makes you important." Her chest tightened, not from fear, but something dangerously close to warmth. "I'm not important," she murmured. "I'm just... me." Raphael shook his head once, firmly. "Don't ever say that again." The words vibrated through her, sinking into the spaces fear had been occupying. He took a slow breath, studying her profile, as though memorizing the slope of her jaw, the trembling of her hands, the shadows under her eyes. "When someone saves me," he said quietly, "I don't forget it. I don't ignore it. And I don't walk away." The light turned green, but he didn't move. He kept his gaze locked on her, unwavering and intense. You stepped into my world tonight, Amira, he whispered, whether you wanted to or not. And now that you're in it. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, stopping just shy of her cheek. I protect what protects me. Her breath came faster. His eyes dipped to her lips, just for a second, a flicker of heat in a storm. Then he pulled his hand away and finally drove forward. But the shift in the air remained. Dangerous, inevitable, electric. And Amira realized something terrifyingly true. Saving Raphael Moretti's life might have been the last normal thing she would ever do. Amira woke the next morning to a notification she didn't recognize. An alert from her building's ancient lobby camera app, the one she barely used because it almost never worked. But today it did, and when she swiped it open, her breath caught. 2 men in dark suits stood at the entrance of her apartment building. One leaned against the wall, scanning the street with a predator's stillness. The other pretended to look at his phone, though every few seconds his eyes flicked toward the front door. Neither belonged in this neighborhood. Neither looked lost. Neither looked friendly. Her stomach sank. They were watching for someone. For her. She replayed the clip, hands trembling. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. Someone had been here all night, or arrived before dawn. The girl who whispered. And suddenly, every shadow, every sound, every unfamiliar face felt like a threat sharpening itself. Her door buzzer went off and she nearly screamed, heart slamming against her ribs. She tiptoed to the intercom, holding her breath as she pressed the button. Hello? A calm voice answered, deep and steady. Amira, it's Marco. She froze. Who? Raphael sent me. Her mouth went dry. Of course he did. Before she could react, her phone lit up with a new message, one from a number she had saved only because deleting it felt even riskier. Raphael Moretti, they're looking for you. Don't open the door unless it's my men. Her pulse raced. She typed back quickly. Amira, what do you mean they? They as in the shooter's people? Or your enemies? The reply came instantly, as if he'd been staring at his screen waiting for her to wake up. Raphael. Both. Her knees buckled and she sank against the wall. Raphael, I told you last night. Once you whispered to me, you stepped into my world. Someone saw you. Someone wants to know who you are. Raphael, I won't allow them to get close. As if on cue, another alert from her lobby camera pinged. A third man, this one unmistakably law enforcement or pretending to be, walked slowly down her street, pausing to glance into her building's windows. Oh, God. Her breath came out in shaky bursts. She typed with trembling fingers. Amira. Raphael, I can't have guards. My neighbors will think I'm hiding something. Raphael. You are hiding something. You're hiding from death. She squeezed her eyes shut, pulse thundering. And then, another buzz. She looked at the camera feed again. This time it wasn't the suited men that made her grip the phone tighter. It was the car, black, silent, sleek as a panther. Raphael's car. Her heart suddenly, irrationally climbed into her throat. She whispered to the empty apartment. He didn't. But he had. He stepped out of the car an instant later, wearing a tailored coat, dark gloves, and an expression carved from granite. Power moved with him, smooth and unquestionable, the kind that made people avert their eyes before realizing they'd done so. The 2 suited guards straightened the moment they saw him. He barely glanced at them. His eyes lifted, finding the exact window of her apartment, as if he felt her watching. And then he did the most terrifying thing of all. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a reassuring smile. A knowing one. A smile that said, "You're mine to worry about now." Moments later, her buzzer rang again. She pressed the intercom with shaking hands. Amira. His voice was low, threaded with impatience and something darker. Let me up, she swallowed. Raphael, you can't just... Amira, he repeated softly, dangerously. If I have to break the door, I will. Please don't make me. Her pulse stuttered at the word please, not because it sounded gentle, but because it sounded like a boundary crossed. A warning dressed as courtesy. She buzzed him in. His footsteps up the stairwell were slow, measured, echoing through the silence like a countdown. When he reached her floor, she barely had time to step back before he appeared in her doorway. Clean lines, cold eyes, a storm wearing a suit. Her breath caught. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. His gaze flicked over her. Still in yesterday's shirt, hair messy from sleep, fear still clinging to her skin. "I should be exactly here," he corrected. "My enemies are hunting for the girl who whispered." He stepped inside without waiting for permission. "And I intend to make sure the only person who finds you is me." She hugged herself, heart hammering. "Why are you doing this? I didn't mean to. I just reacted." Raphael closed the distance between them slowly, deliberately, until he stood close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the air. "You reacted," he murmured, "and that reaction saved my life." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "That makes you a target." Then softer. "And it makes you mine to protect." The words shouldn't have steadied her. They shouldn't have warmed her. They shouldn't have made her feel less alone. But they did. Because when Raphael's eyes locked onto hers, she realized the truth. He wasn't just guarding her. He was claiming her. And nothing in this city dared touch what belonged to Raphael Moretti. The next few days unfolded in a way Amira couldn't have predicted, even in her most unhinged nightmares or fantasies. Raphael Moretti didn't visit her life. He moved into it. Not physically, not yet, but in all the small, daily ways that made avoidance impossible. It started the very next morning. She stepped outside her apartment building at 7:15 a.m., adjusting her scarf, telling herself she was imagining the feeling of being watched. But she wasn't. Raphael leaned against his car at the curb, sipping an espresso from a porcelain cup. Not a paper cup. Porcelain. On a sidewalk. As though the world bent around him and his habits. When he saw her, he set the cup down on the roof of the car and straightened, the slightest easing in his posture, as if he'd been holding tension until she appeared. "You're late," he said. Her brows shot up. "It's 7:15. "You usually leave at 7:10. Her stomach dipped. "You've been watching me?" "Of course." He didn't even blink. He opened the passenger door for her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm driving you to work." "No, you're not." "Yes." A pause, his gaze dipping to her mouth before lifting again. "I am." She should have fought harder. Should have refused. Should have insisted she didn't need a Mafia escort. Instead, she saw the shadows under his eyes, faint but real, and something softened in her chest. He'd been out all night handling whoever sent that gunman. He was here anyway. She got in the car. Not because he ordered, but because part of her wanted to, and Raphael noticed. He didn't hide the small smile that touched his mouth as he shut her door. The drive to the cafe where she worked part-time was quiet, but not awkward. The space between them was thick with something unspoken, something humming beneath the steady purr of the engine. He watched traffic, but he watched her too, reflected in the glass, in the mirror, in the way his fingers flexed against the wheel whenever she shifted. When he parked, he got out too. "Raphael," she groaned, "you can't escort me into my job like you're my—" "Your what?" he asked, holding the door to the cafe open for her. "Say it." She stepped inside, cheeks warming. "Like you're someone important?" His voice dropped, a low echo of amusement. "I am." The barista froze the moment Raphael stepped inside. Several customers went dead silent, spoons clinking against mugs in a stutter. He ignored them all. He walked her to the counter and ordered for her, without asking. "Medium latte, 1 pump of hazelnut, not 2. It's too sweet." She stared at him. "How do you know what I drink?" "You ordered it yesterday." "You remember that?" "Amira." His gaze swept over her face. "I remember everything you've done since the second you whispered in my ear." Her breath hitched. He paid the entire cafe's tab with a casual flick of his card. then guided her to a corner table. "Sit." "I'm working," she reminded. "In 5 minutes," he said calmly. "Sit, drink your coffee." She sat, against her better judgment, against logic, against every rule she'd lived by since she moved to this city. Worse, she liked it. She liked the way he leaned forward, forearms on the table, watching her sip her drink like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. She liked the way his voice softened when he asked, "Did you sleep?" as though her rest mattered to him more than his vengeance. She liked the way he asked about her family, her favorite food, the places she'd lived. Not rapid-fire interrogation, gentle, careful curiosity. She wasn't used to someone wanting her story, but Raphael wanted it. He drank in every detail like he was mapping her, cataloging her, claiming her. "You're learning too much about me," she whispered at one point. "I told you." His voice was calm, but edged with something deeper. "You saved my life. That makes you important." "You keep saying that. And I'll keep saying it until you believe it." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She looked away. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His gaze dipped to her hands, lingering. "I know the way you breathe when you're nervous, the way your voice shakes when you try to be brave, the way your eyes dart to the exits when you're scared." Her throat tightened. He wasn't flirting. He was observing. Deeply. Dangerously. "And I know," he finished quietly, "that every time I step closer, your heart speeds up." Her pulse thundered. He heard it. He knew it. He liked it. There was no pride in his expression, only certainty. "You feel it too," he murmured. She stood abruptly. "I have to start my shift." Raphael rose with her. "I'll be here at closing." "Raphael, you can argue," he said softly, stepping closer. "But it won't change anything. You're under my protection now." Her breath stilled as his hand brushed, only brushed, her elbow, a touch too fleeting and too intimate at once. "And Amira," he added, voice a whisper that curled down her spine. "I protect what matters to me." He left her standing there with her coffee, her racing heartbeat, and a truth she couldn't unhear. Raphael Moretti wasn't just guarding her. He was choosing her. And God help her. A part of her was choosing him right back. The night it happened, the sky hung low and heavy, thick with the promise of rain. A warning whispered in the air. Amira stayed late at the cafe, wiping down tables long after closing, trying to convince herself she wasn't waiting for him. But she was. Raphael always came. Sometimes he stayed outside leaning against his car, sometimes inside at her corner table, sometimes at the counter pretending to read the newspaper. But he always showed up, always watched her walk safely to his car, always drove her home. Tonight she stepped out into the cool night air and there he was, standing beneath a street lamp, coat open, tie loosened, looking like the kind of danger the dark itself bowed to. When he saw her, the tension in his shoulders eased instantly, replaced with that quiet, claiming intensity she was beginning to crave against her will. He didn't ask how her day was. He didn't ask if she was ready to go home. He simply reached out, took her hand, and said, "Come." Not a command, a vow. They walked the short distance to his car, his fingers brushing against hers with every step. The air felt charged, as if the night itself was holding its breath. But as they rounded the corner, Raphael's grip suddenly tightened. Too tight. He pushed her back into the shadows, his arms snapping around her waist as he murmured, "Don't move." Amira barely had time to inhale before she heard it. A metallic click, a low hiss of breath, a whisper of footsteps behind them. Someone was there, someone waiting. Raphael turned his body fully toward her, shielding her from view as he pressed her gently against the wall, pretending to adjust her coat. His voice brushed her ear in a velvet thread. "Stay behind me, no matter what." Then everything happened at once. A figure lunged from the darkness, a blade glinting beneath the streetlight. Raphael moved like a man born from violence. He caught the attacker's wrist mid-swing, twisting with lethal precision. A grunt, a crack, a cry. Amira couldn't follow the movements, only the sound of impact and the terrifying grace with which Raphael dismantled another man's intent to kill. The attacker staggered back, clutching his broken wrist, snarling through clenched teeth. "You should have died at the gala, Moretti." Raphael struck again before the sentence finished. A sharp blow to the ribs, a knee to the thigh. The man collapsed, breathless. But Raphael wasn't done. He delivered a final, brutal strike that sent the attacker crumpling to the pavement. The kind of force that didn't come from anger alone, but from a promise broken. When the man lay unconscious, Raphael exhaled slowly, knuckles split, breathing steady. He didn't look at the attacker. He looked only at her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, controlled, threaded with something raw. Amira shook her head, eyes wide. "No, I'm okay." Now he stepped closer, cupping her face with blood-stained hands so carefully she could cry. "He didn't touch you." "No." "Good." The word came out strangled, like relief was a taste he wasn't used to swallowing. Only then did he turn away, pulling out his phone with a coldness that sent a shiver through her. "Marco. Pick up. Now." Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up. Raphael dragged the attacker inside, giving orders she couldn't fully hear, but his tone left no doubt. Whatever happened next wouldn't be merciful. Yet, despite the violence lingering on his skin, despite the blood drying on his knuckles, he came back to her immediately, as if drawn, as if compelled, as if protecting her was the only instinct left in him. His arm slid firmly around her waist, anchoring her to his side. "We're leaving," he murmured, his breath warm against her temple. "You're not walking alone at night ever again." She swallowed hard. "Raphael, that man tried to kill you." His grip tightened. "He tried to kill us." Her pulse stuttered. "Us." She should have been terrified of him. This man who could break another person with his bare hands. This man who treated violence like a language he spoke fluently. Instead, she felt the safest she'd ever felt. And Raphael knew it. She saw the truth in the way he looked at her. Dark, protective, dangerous in a way that wasn't aimed at her, but for her. When he lifted her chin so she met his eyes, his voice was barely a whisper. "They'll keep coming for me." A pause. His thumb brushed her cheek. "And now, they'll come for you." Her breath trembled. "Then why stay near me?" His jaw flexed, his gaze burning into hers. "Because I would rather die," he said softly, "than leave you unprotected." Then he pressed her closer, his heartbeat hammering against her ribs, and for one terrifying, intoxicating moment she understood. Raphael Moretti wasn't just defending her. He was falling for her, and the city would drown in blood before he let her go. Amira never imagined silence could feel heavy, like a weight settling over a room, but in Raphael's penthouse, silence wasn't empty. It thrummed. It watched. It breathed. She sat curled at the far end of his leather sofa, wrapped in a blanket he'd draped around her shoulders himself. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but Raphael wasn't looking at the skyline. He was looking at her. He stood near the window in a half-shadow, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, the bruises on his knuckles stark against pale skin. His eyes were darker than the night outside, unreadable, fixed on her like she was a question he couldn't stop asking. Amira pulled the blanket tighter, trying to steady her breathing. "You should get that looked at," she murmured, nodding toward his hand. He didn't respond, didn't even glance at it. Instead, he spoke with a sharp honesty that made her spine straighten. "You're afraid." Her breath hitched. "Shouldn't I be?" "You're afraid of what I did," he corrected softly. "But not of me." He moved closer, not looming, not intimidating, just stepping into the glow of a floor lamp so she could see his face clearly. And what she saw made her chest tighten. Not rage, not coldness, not the ruthless mask he wore with the world, but something raw, unshielded, vulnerable in a way she hadn't imagined Raphael Moretti could be. He dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. I don't bring people here, he admitted. Not friends, not allies, not women. His jaw clenched. He looked almost conflicted. You're the only person in this city, he continued quietly, who's seen me fight and didn't run. I didn't exactly have a chance to run, she whispered. He shook his head slowly. No, you chose not to. The room felt warmer suddenly, the air thicker. Raphael moved again, stopping right in front of her, close enough that she felt the heat radiating off him. He knelt. Actually knelt. The Mafia boss everyone feared dropped to one knee on the rug in front of her, leveling himself with her like she was royalty, and he was offering a vow. I trust no one, he said, each word deliberate. Not my underboss, not my lieutenants, not the men who've taken bullets for me. His gaze locked onto hers, unblinking, intense. But you... Her pulse stuttered. You whispered once, Raphael murmured, voice roughened by something unnameable. Just once. And I listened as if your voice were the only truth in the room. He lifted a hand, slowly giving her time to pull away, but she didn't. His fingertips brushed her cheek, feather-light, reverent. Now, he breathed, I listen to every breath you take. The confession hit her like a shockwave. Raphael, her voice cracked, startled by the overwhelming vulnerability in his tone. I don't understand why. I just warned you. Anyone would have... No. His voice sharpened, not with anger, but absolute certainty. No one else saw the danger. No one else looked twice. No one else walked toward a gun. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. No one else would have saved me. Her throat tightened painfully. But why does that mean you trust me? Because, he whispered, your instinct wasn't survival. It was protection. His thumb traced along her jaw, slow and devastating. And people don't protect me, Amira. They fear me. They obey me. They betray me. Something dark flickered in his eyes. But they never guard me. Her heartbeat thudded so loudly, it felt like it filled the room. You changed everything the second you leaned into me, Raphael continued, and I haven't slept since without hearing that whisper, feeling it, needing it. She swallowed, overwhelmed. Raphael, that's too much pressure. It's not pressure. His hand slid beneath her chin, tilting her face toward him with agonizing care. It's the truth. He drew a slow breath, his gaze moving over her face as though memorizing every line. You are the reason I'm alive, he whispered, and I don't know how to undo what that means. The room pulsed with heat, emotions swirling between them like a storm neither could hide from. Her courage had saved his life. But now, she realized with a shiver, her courage had also unmade him. The city's most feared man was kneeling in front of her, undone by the mere sound of her voice. And when she lifted her hand to his, resting her fingers lightly against his bruised knuckles, Raphael's inhale stuttered. Like she had just whispered to him all over again. Amira knew something was wrong the moment she stepped outside the penthouse that morning. Marco, the guard Raphael trusted most, was waiting near the elevator, tense in a way she hadn't seen before. His jaw was tight, his posture rigid, and when he looked at her, there was something like apology in his eyes. Change of plans, he said. Raphael needs you to come with me. Her heart dropped. Why? What's happening? He didn't answer. That was the first sign. The second was the car he led her to. Not Raphael's, not even one of the familiar black SUVs, but a different vehicle entirely. New plates, tinted windows, no insignia. The third sign came once she was inside. The doors locked automatically, not with a soft click, but with a heavy, mechanical thud. Her pulse spiked. Marco, where are we going? He swallowed hard, staring straight ahead. Someplace secure. Raphael didn't tell you to say that, she whispered. Marco's silence was confirmation enough. Her hands began to tremble. She reached for her phone, but it wasn't in her pocket. It must have fallen out in the penthouse. Or been removed. Her stomach twisted. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. The car pulled into a deserted underground garage. The air smelled like oil, cement, and danger. Before she could react, 2 unfamiliar men opened her door, each grabbing an arm. "Let go!" she cried, kicking, twisting. "Don't make this harder," one grunted. But she did. She made it hard. She bit one man's wrist hard enough to taste blood, elbowed the other in the ribs, and tore herself free for 3 frantic steps before someone grabbed her from behind, yanking her off balance so violently she crashed to the concrete floor. Her vision blurred. A boot pressed into her shoulder, pinning her. "Girl's a fighter," one man laughed. "No wonder the boss likes her." Boss, not Raphael. A traitor. Her heart crashed against her ribs. Marco, still standing by the car, looked sick. "Raphael said to keep her safe," he muttered weakly. The ringleader smiled coldly. "He said that using words. We're saying it with actions. She's leverage. He'll hand over the docks to get her back." It hit her all at once. She wasn't being protected. She was bait. And Raphael, calculating, powerful Raphael, had no idea. A panic she'd never known surged through her, but beneath it, something else sparked. Anger. She'd stepped between Raphael and a bullet once. She'd warned him. She'd whispered truth in a room full of lies. She would not be used against him. Not quietly. She drove her heel back into the man pinning her, hard. He shouted, stumbling, and she scrambled to her feet, sprinting toward the ramp. She made it 10 steps. A gun cocked behind her. "Move again, and you die." Her breath froze. The traitor stepped forward, smirking. "Now be a good girl," and the lights exploded. Not figuratively, literally. Every bulb in the garage shattered at once, plunging them into darkness as glass rained from above. A shadow dropped from the ceiling. A scream ripped through the garage. The man with the gun never finished his sentence. The shadow became a shape. The shape became a man. The man became a storm. Raphael. Not the polished version who brought her coffee. Not the man who knelt in front of her whispering confessions. This was the other Raphael. The real Raphael. The one the city feared like a myth. He moved with horrifying precision. Silent. Fast. Lethal. Bone cracked. Someone gurgled. Another man hit the cement so hard the ground shook. The traitor tried to run. Raphael caught him by the collar and slammed him into a pillar with a sound that made Amira flinch. "You touched her," Raphael snarled, voice thick with a darkness she'd never heard. "You used her." He punched the man so hard she swore the air shook. "You made her afraid." Another punch. "You put your hands on her." Another. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" The man crumpled to the ground, wheezing. Raphael drew a blade. Amira stepped forward on instinct. "Raphael, stop." His head snapped toward her, breath ragged, chest heaving. The blade lowered by inches. "Amira," he rasped, voice cracking in a way that broke her. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, grabbing her face in his hands. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, shaking. "But you—" His forehead pressed to hers, a tremor running through him. "I was wrong. I trusted the wrong men. I should have never let you out of my sight." "You didn't know." His hands tightened. "I should have. Because you're the only thing in my world I cannot lose." Her breath hitched. His voice was a raw wound. Fear, fury, and something deeper bleeding into every word. Behind them, one of the traitors groaned. Raphael's head snapped around, expression going dead cold. He whispered against her hair, "Turn around, Amira." "No, turn." She did. She didn't see what Raphael did next, but she heard it, the finality of it, the promise inside it, a promise signed in blood. When he returned to her, his hands still shaking, his voice was nothing but gravel and devotion. "No one," he murmured, cupping her jaw with a blood-stained hand, "will ever use you against me again." And in that moment she understood. This wasn't protection anymore. This was possession. This was wrath. This was love carved into darkness. And Raphael Moretti had just declared a war for her. The gala glittered with gold and noise, champagne laughter, orchestra music, diamonds catching light like sharp-edged stars. It was a room full of power, lies, and people who smiled with their teeth the way wolves did. Amira had no business being here. Not alone, not unescorted. Not in a dress Raphael had sent her with a note that said nothing but, "Wear it." She should have turned around the minute she stepped out of the car. She should have gone home, disappeared, melted into her old life and pretended none of this ever happened. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped into the ballroom and felt the eyes. Not because she was beautiful, though she looked like something precious in sapphire silk, but because everyone in this world had heard the rumor. The girl who saved Raphael Moretti with a whisper. The woman he pulled out of a trap with blood on his hands. The one person he didn't let die. She felt the awareness sweep over her like a tide. She kept her chin high, refusing to crumble under the weight of it. Raphael wasn't with her tonight. Intentionally. I want to see who tries to approach you first, he'd said. She didn't know if it was protection or possession. Maybe both. She made it exactly 3 minutes before a stranger approached. He was slick and polished, the way men in suits who thought they owned the world usually were. Handsome, confident, with a smile that expected her to smile back. "Well, well," he drawled, stepping into her space without being invited. "You must be the famous Whisper." Amira stiffened. "Excuse me?" "The one Moretti keeps under lock and key." His grin sharpened. "Didn't expect you to be here alone." "I'm not—" "Oh, right," he laughed. "He's probably watching from the shadows." She flinched despite herself. The man noticed. His smirk widened. "You want to get a drink? I hear the bar is quieter. Unless you're not allowed to wander off without his permission." She stepped back, pulse jumping. "I'm not interested." "I wasn't asking if you were into—" He never finished the sentence. A hand slid around her hips, firm, warm, possessive in a way that made her breath catch rather than recoil. The stranger's eyes widened, his face draining of color. Raphael was behind her. He didn't arrive. He didn't walk up. He was just there, like the dark had formed around her and given him shape. His palm gripped her hip with quiet certainty, pulling her gently back into his chest as he stared down the man with the calmness of a loaded gun. "She said she's not interested," Raphael murmured, voice smooth as silk and sharp as glass. The man swallowed hard. "Mr. Moretti, I didn't realize." Raphael cut him off with a slight tilt of his head, the kind that said the next words out of the man's mouth might be his last. "You don't need to realize anything." Raphael's gaze didn't blink, didn't waver. "You need to walk away." The man practically tripped over himself, retreating. Raphael didn't watch him go. He was watching her. His hand slid higher on her waist, fingers splaying like he was reminding her, and everyone else, exactly who she belonged to tonight. "You came here alone," he said quietly, voice dipping lower, "and every man in this room saw it." "I'm not fragile," she whispered, tilting her head to meet his eyes. "No," he agreed softly. "You're lethal." Her lips parted. Raphael leaned in until his breath brushed the shell of her ear, intimate enough to make her shiver. "But understand this," he said, his voice a dark vow. "You saved my life. You are the only person in this city who has ever done that. And that makes you mine." He said it with the calm certainty of a man who never needed to raise his voice to make the world tremble. Amira felt the shift. Inside her. Around her. Between them. The last time he said something like that, she had flinched, looked away, pretended she didn't feel the gravity of his words. But not tonight. Tonight she lifted her chin, placed her hand over the one he had on her waist, and looked straight into his eyes. "I know," she whispered. Raphael's breath stopped, just for a second. Just long enough to reveal how deeply her acceptance cut into him. His hand tightened at her hip. The room around them buzzed with whispers, fear, curiosity, envy, but Amira didn't hear any of it. There was only Raphael. Only the man the city feared. Only the man whose pulse she could feel through his grip. And for the first time, she didn't run from his claim. She stood in it, owned it, returned it. Raphael exhaled shakily, a sound no one else would have noticed, but she felt it. Felt it all the way through her. He lowered his forehead to hers, voice a raw confession wrapped in darkness. "Finally," he whispered, "you're looking at me." And she realized she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of how deeply she already belonged to him.